Hey everyone, it is Tuesday, Cowboy Metals Live. I'm your host, 𝘎𝘀𝘾𝙊𝙈 from �goldsilverpros.com, and it is May 16th, 2023. We're at 4 p.m. Central Time to date it. Welcome to Cowboy Metals Live. We're broadcast from the great state of Texas and take no BS. With your host, Robert here. We have a poll up: who really owns the gold? Your answers are the people, the Fed, or the Treasury, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's why the title of today's video, New Dangerous Plan to Steal U.S. Gold. All right, now that we've got that set up, I wanted to chat with you guys about this proposal. And it's an interesting one made by, a pundit in the financial space talking about, what if we revalued our gold. So for example, gold right now is valued at something like 42.22 or something along those lines officially, on the books, in terms of, what the Treasury has it for. And the potential there to raise $500 billion is to take that gold that's held by the Treasury and revalue it at current market prices. So up from $42.22 up to its current price over 2000, that would raise about $500 billion. Well, gold's right at 1998, so about $2,000. That would raise about $500 billion for the government. And what happens is the Treasury just gives an updated gold certificate to the Fed. Because back in after the Fed was created, it was created in 1913 to be the central bank and to do several of those types of things. And I'll just give you the history. We'll start with the Constitution. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, or make anything, thing is in capital, and when it's in capital and legal sense, that means thing means anything that can be defined under the law. Make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. So originally gold and silver were tender. They were money of the land. But back during, the 1900s, we were having issues. We needed to create more currency in circulation to pay for wars and do things like that. Plus, eventually in the Great Depression, we came across really tough times in which we needed to raise money. And so that's where a lot of this comes from. So I'm going to give you the history of this, but I'm going to tell you about why it's a dangerous plan and why the U.S. could be giving away their gold if we do what the financial pundit said, which was on Zero Hedge, which is revalue the existing gold from the $42 an ounce to about the $2,000 an ounce now. It does give you $500 billion, but I think it also gives a claim to that gold, and we'll talk about that. Before we get into it, let's get into a little bit of history. In 19, the Federal Reserve Act gives power of monetary creation, providing payment services and banking regulation to the Fed. That was given to the Fed. Now it's a private entity, and the Fed will tell you they're quasi-governmental is the term, or somewhat government-owned, somewhat private. In reality, each member bank of the Fed elects their own independent board of governors. There is an appointment of the chairman, I believe by the president, it has to be approved by Congress. But the shares of the Federal Reserve are held by private banks. It's not owned by the government. So ultimately, if the Federal Reserve owns the gold, they own the gold. The shareholders own the gold. Now, there is an agreement with the Fed and the Treasury that the Fed's role is to issue, the money supply, control inflation, look at employment. That's its current remit. Of course, it didn't always have that. Back in 1913, it was a different system. Then came the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. And in March of 1933, that Emergency Banking Act gave the president the power to control international and domestic gold movements. And it gave the Secretary of the Treasury the power to compel surrender of gold coins and certificates. And Roosevelt in 1933 said the following. He's president. He said, in our progress towards a resumption of work, we require two safeguards against the return of evils of the old order. There must be a strict supervision of all banking and credits and investments so that there will be an end to speculation with other people's money. And there must be provision for an adequate but sound currency. Well, what had happened? You basically had the stock market blow up and all of those types of concerns with the economy. And that's what caused Roosevelt to do that. So on April 20th, President Roosevelt issued a proclamation. And in that proclamation, he formally suspended the gold standard. That's where dollars are tied to gold, and you can take $1 and redeem it for gold if you wanted to. That was suspended on April 20, 1933 by President Roosevelt. He got that power from a law that Congress had basically passed, giving the president additional powers. I still think issue an executive order to do this was probably not within the spirit of the law, but at the end of the day, there is law that gave the president additional powers, and that's why it happened. The proclamation prohibited exports of gold and prohibited the Treasury and financial institutions from converting currency and deposit into gold coins and ingots. So there we got a little bit of history about that. And then if we go further, in May of 1933, the administration also weakened the links to gold and the dollar. The Thomas Amendment to the Agricultural Relief Act gave the president the power to reduce the gold content by as much as 50% to the dollar. And the president also received the power to back the dollar with silver. Hence, you know, the silver, junk silver constitutional money that we had, I think, until 1965, with maybe one other coin until 1969, if I recall, either 40 or 90% silver. That was because in 1933, essentially the president and the Treasury and the Fed switched or shifted the focus in the American monetary system from gold to silver. Silver's a lot cheaper. It was much easier for them to coin money in the realm. They revalued gold. Boom. You had your money. Okay. And then you could pay for debts. And that's what happened back in 1933. The president also received the power to back the dollar with silver rather than gold, with both silver and gold at silver prices determined by the administration. So that basically the Fed at that point wasn't also responsible for monetary policy. In these acts and in these things, the Exchange Stabilization Fund was funded, a part of the Treasury, I believe. And that fund was funded with the money that they had with the gold confiscation or the gold collection through the president's executive order. The Exchange Stabilization Fund is the one that intervenes in markets. And its whole point is to maintain stability of the dollar system, Well, in 1951, the Fed and Treasury reached an accord. It gave monetary power back to the Fed from the Treasury. So no longer the Fed wasn't just answering whatever the Treasury wanted to do. The Fed was now given those independent powers it was originally created with. The Treasury then holds the gold and use it for Exchange Stabilization Fund and other things, supposedly. I believe a lot of that gold has been used to fund interventions by the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Of course, we haven't had an audit of our gold, I think, since the 1950s. It's been 60, 70 years at this point. So we don't really know what's in there. It could be more than the 8,100 and some tons we think we have. It could be less. We don't know if the Exchange Stabilization Fund has utilized those assets or others' assets, or has lent or leased the gold for money or other, or how that works. But we don't know that we have 8,100 unencumbered tons of gold in the US. We just don't know because of that Fed Treasury Accord. And so fast forward to the new proposal. What you have now is you have the Fed given a gold certificate by the Treasury. The Treasury says, okay, Fed, we're going to keep the gold, but we're going to issue a certificate. Now, the certificate does not allow the Fed, according to the Federal Reserve's website, where I got this information, the certificate that the Treasury gave the Fed in response to getting the gold back at $42 an ounce does not allow redemption rights. So the Fed can't just go grab the gold. So you may say, okay, well, what's the plan to steal the gold? Well, essentially, the gold always belonged to the people, hence the question in the poll. The answer is the people. It belonged to the people. The Constitution said no state should make anything other than gold and silver money, essentially. And the money, the Fed wasn't created at the time of the Constitution. So the Treasury would be the one that holds the gold on behalf of the people. But now, with the 1913 Act, gold was given over to the Fed. And now the Treasury holds it, and the Fed has some certificate claim, but the Fed shouldn't be holding the gold because the Fed is an independent agency whose shareholders are outside. They're in the commercial banks and stuff like that. They're outside of the government. And so essentially it gives a claim to the gold. Now, one more thing would have to happen. Let's say this proposal is accepted and we revalue the gold held by the Treasury up to its current price. Let's just say $2,000 an ounce, just to make it easy. So $2,000 an ounce, it creates $500 billion. $500 billion goes to pay off debt and stuff like that. That's nothing compared to the $32 trillion in debt we currently have. It's a drop in the bucket. It's like 1/62nd of it or somewhere along those lines. It's a drop in the bucket. And as soon as they do it, they're never going to get the money back again. Well, now the Fed would have a certificate for the gold that the Treasury holds at the current price. To me, that is the genesis or the beginning of a lawsuit. Let's say the Fed, we come upon a point at which the Fed's creating all this money, we go bankrupt, and to save the Fed, would they not then capitalize the Fed with the gold? Because think about Basel requirement, Basel III. Gold is a high quality liquid asset, right? So gold is going to be one of those banking assets. So that came out. We're looking at the potential dissolution of the dollar, moving over the digital dollar. Now this proposal comes out, I'm sure completely innocently, that we could reissue a new certificate for the current price of gold to the Fed. Once you did that, that creates a legal claim on that gold, regardless of who owns it. And I could see the Fed then saying, or the government then saying, we get into financial trouble. Well, let's just, sell off the gold from the Treasury, give it to the Fed, because they already have a claim on it. They have that gold certificate. Because if you think about it, back in the 1913 Act, the Fed had the original claim on the gold. Because why? Because the gold was backing the dollar. It was a gold standard. We're not on the gold standard, so now the Treasury holds it. But if they're going to recapitalize the system with gold, it would make sense then that the Fed would have that certificate at current price gold, because they could use that then to then back up the central banking system. They could use that certificate as an asset that essentially locks the nation's gold up to support the new digital dollar or the new central banking system. And I know that's kind of complicated. There's a lot of back and forth, but we'll sum it this way. In the beginning, gold and silver belonged to the people, which was held by the Treasury. In 1913, due to certain economic difficulties, the Federal Reserve System was created. That allowed the gold standard, allowed printing of currency, but allowed it to be backed by gold. Of course, the only reason you pass that is so that eventually you can inflate the money supply. Otherwise, why not just use gold, right? You could say, well, gold's not easy to trade back and forth and we need paper, but we had that before. What people may not understand is previous to the creation of the Fed in 1913, the banking system, the independent banks and the state banks in the collective United States could simply issue currency for any asset that they had. So they could hold gold and issue currency against it, and it was a claim on the gold, right? So you had the ability then to use gold and issue like a banker's paper or banker certificate, pledging that as collateral. So that was a form of paper that you could trade. So it kind of made gold money using a banker's form of paper. But what happened was when the Federal Reserve was created, they became like the old goldsmiths and gold banks, where they realized people wanted them to hold the gold and they weren't going to redeem it, so they could issue more money. And as long as they kept enough gold to pay off the ones that redeemed it, usually somewhere around 0.5% to 1% or so, they were okay. And so the rest of the gold was either sold off, used in an exchange stabilization fund, leased out, whatever it was. And I believe that's why we have less gold. Okay. So we don't have as much gold, but there's a claim on that gold. There's a certificate that the Fed has. So regardless of what the Treasury has, the Fed has that certificate. And that certificate is going to be used, I believe, to state how much gold we have. Now, they're not auditing it. They're not showing us the bars. But if they issue a certificate, one, it kind of establishes credibility, probably in the mainstream media's eyes and for people not well informed, that we have all the gold we say we have, and all of a sudden it's valued at $2,000 an ounce. Of course, people are going to say, yeah, take the 500 billion. People don't understand the value of gold, and they don't understand gold that could potentially be held by the central bank. But given the fact that the Fed has this certificate, and given the fact that we're going into the digital currency era, and given the fact Basel III standards make gold a high quality liquid asset, I think what's going to happen is that gold that supposedly the Treasury holds is going to be given to the Fed to capitalize the new digital currency system, the new digital dollar, implemented by Fed now, whatever they're going to call it, that's what it is. And I think it's essentially a long 100-year plan to basically steal all the gold. And when I say steal the gold, because the Fed, even though it's a quasi-governmental agency, which has some governmental oversight, it's run privately. The shares are owned by independent banks. So the Fed gets that gold, technically they have it, okay? It belongs to them. And if the United States ever gets in trouble, the Treasury ever gets in trouble, the government ever gets in trouble, they're going to give away that gold to the Fed because it's the only thing they have. That's what countries do. And so I think revaluing gold at its current price is an incentive for the Fed to say, okay, we're going to get true value for this gold. We want that gold when you run into economic trouble. Now, what causes the economic trouble? Well, one is the Congress and the people spending more. And I say the people because we are part of the Congress. We are the body politic. And the Congress and the people together have allowed ourselves as a country to go bankrupt. And so the Fed, this proposal to get that gold revalued, I think provides the Fed an avenue to then say, okay, when you get in trouble, just give us the gold at that current value, and because they revalued it once, they could do it again. What if gold goes up to 3 or 4 or 5? The Fed gladly would say, yeah, revalue it and we'll issue the money. You issue a new certificate at $3,000 gold, we'll issue the difference of money. Maybe it's another, 250, 300, or a couple hundred billion, whatever it is. But every time they do that, what the Fed does is say, well, we issued you the money, you have the gold, now you're bankrupt, give us the gold. I think that's what's coming next. I think they're going to revalue it to give the money. The money's going to go to pay debt or do whatever it's going to be done. And I think that's going to set the precedent for the Fed to say, okay, now we can revalue gold anytime we want. And oh, by the way, when you get in trouble, I'll take that. Why? because the Basel standards make gold a high quality liquid asset, and all the central banks want it. And so I think the Fed is probably going to go after the gold. Now, they'll have to go out at higher prices, but it's still cheap as to what we think the gold could be worth. Because if you look at monetary creation, gold could be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. If you look at derivatives, I think it's something like 60,000. And so I think the Fed stands to really benefit from this. Now, this move in itself, issuing a new gold certificate, does not provide the legal impetus that the Fed has, direct ownership of the gold. But it does provide the impetus for the Fed to say, okay, we loaned you the money for this gold. We'll take the gold in exchange, by the way, when you can't pay it back. Because what's happening is the government, they're going broke. Okay, the government's going broke. So it's a precursor move, I think, eventually to wresting the gold away and giving it to the central bank. I think that's incredibly dangerous. I don't want to see this happen. I want us to go back to pre-1913 when the people owned the gold in the first place. And that's hence the poll question. I believe that people should own the gold. I don't think that we should capitalize the Fed or any central bank and use the gold to support the dollar. I don't think that the Treasury should be issuing certificates to the Fed saying, oh, we're holding the gold, but here's a certificate for you, because it creates a legal argument that the Fed has a claim to that gold later on, because they created money for the gold. At some point, couldn't they then say, well, just give us the gold when you can't, pay the money back or you go bankrupt? So when the United States goes into potential bankruptcy, I think the gold is then going to be given over to the central bank. This is what it looks like to me that proposal would do. And it would be one of the assets given over among others. And personally, whether or not we have 8,000 tons, if we only have 5 tons or we have 20,000, whatever the real number is, I don't want to give that gold away. That's our national treasury. That's our national piggy bank, right? And it's bad enough that we have the dollar system, which creates inflation, but we got to get control of it. And the only way to get control of it is the Congress and the Fed and all those guys aren't going to change the system. They're going to do whatever they have to do to preserve the status quo because they get elected. It's their job. We, the people, have to speak up and say, wait, we don't like this plan. We, the people, have to say, this is not something that we're interested in. This is what we're interested in. We're interested in gold and silver, and we're interested in that being owned by us, we, the people. And we want it through the Treasury, and we want to prohibit the Treasury from ever doing that again. We want to prohibit the Treasury from ever creating another central bank again. We want to prohibit the Treasury from ever giving control of the nation's precious metals over to a central bank. We want to prevent the Treasury from issuing a gold certificate, which may create a legal claim to that gold, especially when they can't, maybe pay it back, or they created the money and they got to do something back. You see, those are all, very dangerous steps to take that when we get into economic bankruptcy, which we will, means that some of the key assets that we have to get us out of it, other people will have a claim and are going to go after it, if that makes any sense. And I think it's just a dangerous precedent. Now, the person that suggested this, I think also was involved in Europe and negotiations around using gold to pay off debt. And that country that used gold to pay off debt now doesn't have the gold. Now, you can say they paid off the debt, but they don't have the gold and they've never replenished it. And that's the danger. If you lose that gold, or if you have claims on that gold and you can't use it when you need it, when you really need it, that's an issue. And the last point I'd like to make, let's say we value it right now at 2,000 and that gold certificate gives the Fed a claim on 2,000. What if gold goes to 20,000? The gold the Fed just got 90% off. That's the other thing. You got to be very careful when you build these agreements and set specific prices, because if we think gold and silver are going to go up, you don't want to value gold at 2,000. You want to value gold at 10 or 20. And the Treasury needs to take control, because the Fed does it. You're allowing the central bank to have control, not only over the monetary supply, but over the gold backing, over the crown jewels of the country, if you will. What needs to happen is we need to repeal the Fed, end the Fed. And then what we need to do after we end the Fed is we need to make law that either gold and silver can only be money, or whatever monetary unit we have is backed by gold and silver. It needs to be transparent. You can even put the reporting on the blockchain, not the gold and silver. I'm not saying make it a Bitcoin product, but put it on the blockchain so that people can see it, and make sure that that's audited and that's in the law, so that 2 to 3 times a year, we always know how much gold we actually have in stock because it's been audited. And then you'll have the blockchain, which is your digital report, which says what you have. And you marry those two together and boom, you got a nice check. That would reestablish gold in the hands of the people. It would make sure that whenever gold is used to recapitalize systems after a currency reset or a currency crash, which is always what happens, that the full value of that gold only belongs to the Treasury and therefore the U.S. people, and not the federal bank, Federal Reserve, or anyone else, any third party, any outside party. to take control of that gold back, to take control of our family wealth, our United States family wealth, we need to do these things. And that's what I'm proposing. Also, and if you're interested in gold and silver cheaply, simply order 𝘎𝑆GO. They've rebranded themselves, 𝘎𝑆GO. If you go to our website, 𝘠𝑒𝑠𝑖𝙠 and you click on the 𝘎𝑆GO link, you can order silver from our friend Ian, who has the best deals on gold and silver. You can fill out the form and he email you back, and it's really easy to get to. We'll just put it up on the screen for you, 𝘠𝑒𝑠𝑖𝙠. And this does help the channel if you guys are interested in that. It definitely does help the channel because we do get a little bit from that and from Ian over at ARC Silver. So you just go to 𝘠𝑒𝑠𝑖𝙠 as I have on the screen. You click on More in Precious Metals. You can go down to ARC Silver and click on Access Deals, fill out this form, and Ian will get back to you with that. And he has some of the lowest premium gold and silver, mostly silver, but he has some gold as well. So if you're interested in getting your own financial backing, because remember, you're going to want this, because I think what's happened with the 1913 Federal Reserve Act and the 1951 accord between the Treasury and the Fed is all of this gold that we have, or silver, any precious metals that we have, is now there's a legal claim by the central bank. And I'm not 100% sure that the gold that we say we have first is there because I haven't been audited, but second, that the Treasury would keep it and then it would recapitalize at current rates for the benefit of the people, not the central bank. We don't want to recapitalize for the benefit of the central bank. We want to recapitalize for the benefit of the people. This is the people's money. It's not the central banker's money, it's the people's. But because of the current situation, you're not going to get at that gold. You'll never, none of the people in the United States will ever have a claim to that gold. I don't care what the law currently says, because it's going to be used to recapitalize the digital dollar. They'll never release it. You'll never get access to it. It'll never be used to provide stability to the system, not with the plans that they have. And the only way you can do that is get this yourself. Get your gold and silver yourself. Go to 𝘎𝑆GO or go to your local coin dealer, wherever you want to go, and get your gold and silver and recapitalize your own balance sheet. Recapitalize yourself. Protect yourself. Don't let, what the Fed and Treasury are doing, and basically selling the crown jewels of our country out. Don't let them affect your own financial plans. Don't let them, you can't count on that. The gold and the dollars and everything at the national level is no good to us. First of all, the dollars are a debt. It's a debt instrument. And the gold, it's owned by the Treasury, but there's a huge claim by the Federal Reserve. And the Treasury is going to give it up to prevent default. Treasury doesn't want to default. The government doesn't want to default. And all we're doing is creating this legal nexus around it by doing these things like gold certificates and things. We need to get rid of all of that. The whole system needs to go away, because this is how they steal the gold. You do it by profligate spending and creating claims on this, for outside entities. They're owned by shareholders that may or may not be U.S. owned, but they're sure as heck not owned by the people. So any which way the Fed gets involved in gold, we don't want them involved, because it's a third party. It's an independent party. We don't want them to have any claim on the gold. We don't want them issuing currency on the gold, because that creates a liability. And it means eventually the gold's going to be sold to someone else. And that's not as an asset of the nation, because all assets of the nation are pledged to the currency. That includes gold. It includes everything else. It includes your labor. It includes your bank account. That's why the bail-in laws, Dodd-Frank, all of that kind of stuff. So that's not something that we want to happen, but that's the plan. That's what people, are suggesting be put into place. I think we have to be extremely careful. Any new laws or acts created around gold that gives claim to that to other people that aren't we the people and aren't our Treasury. That's what we need to do. We need to guard against that. And so when I saw that come out in the news this week, I absolutely had to talk about it. It's a sneaky way, I think, of saying, let's get the U.S. in more debt. Let's tie it to gold. And later on, we're going to go negotiate that. And at some point, they're going to want the gold from the U.S. I know it. It's the last big treasury of gold in the world, the 8,000 tons, which we supposedly have, in which you look at the nation about to go bankrupt and the dollar about to crash. And I think they're coming after it. I think they're coming after that 8,000 tons of gold. And they're going to baby step their way to it. And they're going to slide in sideways. They're not going to come tell you they're going to take it. They're going to slide in sideways, and they're going to do whatever they can to build that legal nexus. And then when the time comes and the country goes bankrupt, they're going to say, give me the gold. I'll take the gold. And it's going to happen. And so this, gold and silver, anything, it's not, we the people aren't going to have it. So you got to get your own. 𝘎𝑆GO is a good way to go. Of course, there are plenty of other places to go, but you're going to have to secure your own gold and silver. The U.S. government is not going to issue you gold and silver because it's going to crash. It's going to sell off the gold and silver to pay off for all the spending that it did on wars and welfare. That's what's going to happen. And this is a dangerous plan. And I wanted to get this out because it's not where we want to go. This is not where we want to go, but it's where they're going to try to take us. And we have a couple of choices. We can fight it legally and culturally and talk about it. That's what this presentation is for in social media and writing your congressman. Is that going to stop it? Probably not. I think you're going to have to get this yourself and the gold version of this. I think it's the only way. And I think the writing is on the wall that when the US goes bankrupt and they give up their gold and we get the digital currencies, that's going to remove last ties to anything in the Constitution surrounding money. It's going to eliminate any power of the Treasury to control monetary flows. It's all going to be in the hand of the central banks, I believe, and their new digital currency. And the laws on the book will allow the central banks to bail in, take money out of your account, and to issue direct payments and create like universal basic income, which creates dependency on the government by the people. And they're going to be able to control the money so they can control how much you get and what it's worth. And that's all in the hands of the central bank. And I think this move to revalue gold is one of the steps they're going to use to grab the nation's assets and then control the system using central bank digital currencies. Because think about it, if the Treasury didn't have gold, how does it stand up to the Fed, which controls the nation's monetary supply? The Fed would have all the power. So we don't want to do anything else with regard to gold certificates. We want to remove legally any claim that the central bank would have to gold. We want to put in place legally provisions which would prevent any outside party outside the Treasury from ever getting control of the gold. We want to put a law into place that says the Treasury cannot sell the gold, cannot use it in exchange stabilization fund, cannot lease it out, cannot rehypothecate it, can't do anything with it other than distribute to the people when they need it, because it is the nation's monetary supply backing up the nation. And we are the nation, and we pay our taxes, and we're the ones that build all of this, and it's not up to the bureaucrats to tell us that. It's not their gold. It's not their money. The system is not their system. So it's up to us to talk about this, and it's up to us to push back. And by the way, as you're pushing back, if this system does get put into place, go buy this. Just go buy it. Just whatever you need to secure your own financial future. Because it appears as though the government, along with the central banks of the world, are going to sell all of their people and all of their constituents and everybody down the river. And unless you have your own gold and silver, you're screwed. Okay, you're screwed with this plan. I see what they're doing. You look at the history and you look at other countries that have done this. Whenever they create this legal nexus or this connection to gold, they always end up taking it. They always end up taking it. And I believe with the Basel Accords and this proposal, they want to revalue gold up to 2,000 or whatever the current rate is, so that when they go to the digital currency, they're going to say, okay, we need to capitalize this. The rest of the world is capitalizing with gold. China's doing it. Russia's doing it. Treasury gives us the gold. And that's what's going to happen. And I don't like that because it gives the Fed tremendous power and it gives them tremendous value, because they say they do it for 2,000 or 3,000 and then gold's worth 10 or 20. Who gets all that money? The Fed does. It creates a super bank essentially. And so it depends on when they get the gold. After the revaluation, before, all those things matter. So in order to stop this, we need to put legal precedent in place. The Congress needs to come, we need to do it. Now, what are the chances of that happening right now? Pretty slim, which is why you got to have your own plan. You got to do your own plan because the government has sold you down the river. The government has sold you down the river with respect to precious metals. And if you don't get your own, you don't have it, okay? You're not going to have anything. And the Treasury on it gives me zero comfort whatsoever, because maybe it's already gone. And maybe they give it over to the Fed, because the dollar is going to crash. And that's the danger. So I just want to bring this to you. I think I've hammered this home a lot, but I think it's a very important topic, something not a whole lot of people are talking about. But as soon as I saw this article come out, I immediately knew what this episode was going to be about. It's a dangerous plan. I don't like it. When you add it to everything that's happened since 1913, it's going to put all the monetary power in the hands of the Fed and create a super bank. And that's not what we want. We want this to go to the people. This is the people's money. This is the people's labor. This is hundreds of years of people's labor in gold and in silver, if you're independent outside the Treasury, that's storing the value of the nation over time. This is our Treasury. This is the collective labor of our nation. This is the collective earnings of our nation. Okay. We don't want to give that over, and we don't want to create claims to that. We need to remove claims. Okay. And we need to take the gold and silver back. And we in our independent lives need to do it as well. Jeff England, thank you so much for the contribution. And yes, we try to bring the truth as much as we can. And we definitely appreciate you guys supporting the program. You guys have been an absolutely wonderful audience. I appreciate that. A really special announcement, a little baby announcement. I've got a bigger one later on, but as you can see, I've got the virtual background up because I'm in a new studio. We're actually building a new studio. This is going to be really cool. So when the new studio is available, we'll reveal it to you guys. We're going to have a new background, new setup, new cameras, all that good stuff, and it's going to look really sweet. And this is something, I'm just doing because, I want the channel the quality of the channel to grow. And as we do this further over time, I think it's good to make some upgrades every once in a while. So that is coming pretty soon. So stay tuned to that. And this is going to do it for today's presentation. It's about 30 minutes. I think we've got it. Stay tuned on the channel because we've got lots of other content. We're going to do the conclusion of the very special video that Nathan and I did, video review over the PBS's documentary over the Federal Reserve System, the Age of Money. We went over the first half of that, the setup. The second half is going to be talking about this topic as well as all the other topics related to that. And then we're going to give you solutions because Nathan and I want to provide you solutions to what's going on. So we believe that will come out this week, probably Thursday. We'll have that video out and we'll provide you solutions to things that you can do. Because I think there's a lot, when you see the mainstream media talking about the death of the dollar, it's right around the corner. And when you see proposals, basically take the gold of the nation. I know this is silver, but I don't have gold on me. But to take the precious metals of the nation and do what they're going to do with it. And then the central bank digital currencies are coming. They're just ushering us into that system. And we have to fight it every step of the way. You fight it two ways. You fight the public implementation of it, and then you get this for yourself. You got to do both. You can't just be political, and you can't just buy precious metal. We got to do both. We got to speak up and buy the precious metal. And I think that is a solution. We'll talk about that later on this week. All right. Till next time, this has been Rob Kientz, Gold, Silver Pros, Cowboy Metals Live, May 16th, 2023. It is now 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Y'all have a very blessed day, and we will see you in a couple of days. Until next time, this is Rob Kientz, Gold, Silver Pros.